Sometimes life's burdens can take their toll on your emotional well-being. If you or a loved one is struggling, know that you are not alone. South Texas Health System Behavioral can help you cope with depression, manage feelings of anxiety, regain control of mood swings, and recover from substance use disorders. Our staff is available 24/7, offering the quality and compassionate inpatient and outpatient care you need to overcome life's challenges. South Texas Health System Behavioral, where your mental health is our priority. Good afternoon and welcome to our latest Let's Talk Mental Health webinar. I'm Tom Castañeda, the System Director of Marketing and Public Relations for South Texas Health System. On behalf of STHS Behavioral, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Now, in an effort to break the stigma surrounding mental health in the Rio Grande Valley, STHS Behavioral launched these Let's Talk webinars 3 years ago. Through these webinars, which offer expert insights on common mental health conditions affecting people in the Valley and beyond, hopefully more community members will feel inspired to have open and honest conversations about their own mental health challenges with loved ones and, if necessary, seek treatment. In this installment, we'll be focusing on anxiety. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental disorders in the United States, affecting some 40 million adults, or about 19% of the population, according to the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. Anxiety increases the risk of depression and substance use disorders, as well as suicidal thoughts and behaviors. While anxiety disorders are highly treatable, only about 30% of those suffering from anxiety receive treatment. So how is anxiety diagnosed and how is it treated? And what steps can we take to overcome anxiety with or without drugs? Well, today we're joined by Bob Cooper, a licensed clinical social worker supervisor at STHS Behavioral, with the answers to those important questions and more. Bob, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to be here again.
And you are always one of our favorite guests here because you have so much incredible experience.
Thank you.
Now tell us a little bit about anxiety. In your day-to-day routine, how often do you see anxiety? How would you say that patient count would be?
Honestly, 80 to 90% of the people that I see in private practice have a problem with anxiety, and that's what drove them to the office in the first place. And I think that one of the things that's going on with this is that the stigma about it is less, and people are more willing to seek treatment today and to speak about how they feel mentally and emotionally.
And untreated anxiety can truly lead to those issues such as the depression and as well as the substance use disorders and the suicidal thoughts.
One of the problems with anxiety is that it can kind of snowball on itself. We have the opportunity these days to see somebody in an office setting or through telehealth. And the outcomes that I have seen personally with telehealth and anxiety have not been very good because the person with anxiety needs to get out of their home and out into the world so that that can help them fight their anxious feelings.
So having that connection with the community and speaking with the therapist in person, getting out of the house, because we tend to lock ourselves up, obviously, when it comes to issues like, you know what, I'm just going to avoid it at all costs,
right?
Which isn't healthy. And
when you're anxious, you can back up and just literally back yourself into a corner that makes it more difficult to get out of.
And again, it's highly treatable.
Absolutely. It is one of the most treatable and one of the most diagnosed disorders in the United States, as you mentioned at the outset.
And there are several types of anxiety disorder
when
we talk about it. And I know in your presentation, you're going to go through some of those, right?
Absolutely.
All righty, well, let's begin.
Let's get started. Okay, so my anxiety is getting on my last nerve. Tried to be a little funny about this and a little light, but this is how people are starting to feel these days. It feels like everything is falling apart. We hear a lot of bad news. We hear a lot of catastrophic predictions, and nobody's really sure what to do, what the next step or what the next thing in their life is going to be. This kind of feeling in this slide is a lot more common. So anxiety is an emotion characterized by apprehension and somatic symptoms, physical symptoms, of tension that can lead the individual thinking about possible danger and catastrophe. That's from the American Psychological Association, but really what it means is that we're afraid. So there are several types of anxiety disorders. They just made some changes when they updated to the DSM-5 about anxiety disorders and removed some. But in general, the most common one for childhood, separation anxiety disorder. It's just where they don't like being away from mommy and daddy. It's very, very common. They used to have panic disorder and agoraphobia kind of linked together, and in DSM-5 they separated those. A person with panic disorder has discrete panic attacks. Now those panic attacks feel like they last a lifetime, but really 2 to 10 minutes at the most. Agoraphobia is the fear of being out in public spaces, usually around a lot of people. In the past, traditionally, if you had a panic attack, it was diagnosed with or without this idea. And the main fear of agoraphobia is being caught out somewhere and having your panic make you look like a fool or just making you look bad in front of other people. In my previous clinical experience back in Kentucky, I had a treatment plan that was based solely around the brand new Super Walmart because there were a lot of people that were afraid to go there. It's a cavernous place. If you get to the back of the store, there's not any place to run to. And you can feel stuck, and there were a lot of people there. So agoraphobia could be kind of people that have problems going to the grocery or just going out in public in general. Linked to that is social anxiety disorder, where I don't like to be around a whole lot of people. We're seeing more and more of that with children today who just don't want to go to school because they don't like being around other kids. The most common single diagnosed mental disorder in the United States are specific phobias. And that's for people who are just diagnosed with one mental disorder. Specific phobia is the most common. Specific phobia means there is one thing that really, really makes you afraid. Everybody knows about people being afraid of snakes, being afraid of spiders. Those are specific phobias. There are other types of phobias around germs and blood. My late wife had a horrible, horrible fear of caterpillars and worms. They're specific phobias. And the last is generalized anxiety disorder, which is kind of a catch-all. If you can't diagnose any of these other types of anxiety, oftentimes you end up with generalized anxiety disorder. And that just means that you're nervous for no particular reason most of the time, and it's causing problems. Okay, so symptoms of anxiety. You're nervous, anxious, or on edge. You worry too much, and you worry about different things usually. That's separate altogether. Anxiety can make you really irritable. If you're nervous and kind of tense, you really don't want people to bother you about it very much, and you can have some anger over that, especially if the persons that you care about tell you, you've got nothing to worry about. Why don't you just get over it? Hypervigilance means that you're looking for danger everywhere. I mentioned before that my late wife was afraid of caterpillars, and she looked for them everywhere, and she would see them before anybody else because she was deathly afraid of those things. Avoidance means that you avoid any kind of place that might trigger your anxiety. People that have problems with driving oftentimes just will not get into a car, and they'll stay home as much as possible, and they only travel when they have to. And you can have physical body tension. There are 3 main treatments for anxiety. The most common one is medications. You can get those medications from a primary care physician. It doesn't have to be a psychiatrist, although some of the medications do have an addiction potential, and so sometimes a primary care physician will insist that you see a psychiatrist to manage those meds. Counseling is a good alternative for anxiety, where you talk about where the anxiety came from and what am I going to do about it now? How can I deal with that more effectively? And you learn coping skills about how to reduce your anxiety, but also how to understand that some of these anxious thoughts aren't particularly rational. And then there are self-help groups for people with anxiety. That's one of the things that the proliferation of things like Facebook and Instagram have allowed for people to have a meeting place where they can talk about their anxiety so that they feel supported, and most of all, they don't feel like they're alone in this fight. So, not all anxiety is bad anxiety, because anxiety is protective. The There are places before that have tried to extinguish anxiety. That's an impossibility. So if you are working with a counselor and you have the idea that I'm going to get rid of all of my anxiety, that's not going to happen. Because anxiety is important. It protects you. If you're down on the expressway and somebody cuts you off, it's your anxiety that is reacting to that fear and that stimulation. So that's one of the biggest saving graces of anxiety, is that it protects you from triggers or dangers. Anxiety is adaptive. You can learn from your anxiety, and you can learn to keep yourself away from potential dangers. But also anxiety, as I mentioned before, is unavoidable. But anxiety is uncomfortable, and it is the number one cost driver as far as mental health for just about every insurance company. Why? Because when you feel anxious, you oftentimes in panic, you start to feel physical symptoms. Your heart starts racing. You feel like you can't breathe. You feel like you're dying. And where do you go? To the emergency room. And that's where most of the cost for anxiety comes. And then there's follow-up doctor visits after that, and medications. Anxiety is very difficult to keep people out of the emergency room. And to be very honest, I've been to the emergency room 3 times and it turned out to be anxiety. Thought I was having a heart attack because I was having severe chest pain. So one of the problems with treating anxiety, with having anxiety in general, is we're not built for it. When somebody cuts you off on the expressway, what happens is that the part of your brain that controls your anxiety reacts to that danger, and then once it's resolved, things are supposed to level out and be calm. People that have serious problems with anxiety feel like there's danger around them all the time, and we're just not built for that, and that's where the problem comes in. You feel stressed all of the time, you don't rest very well, and you're looking around for the next thing that's going to threaten you. You may have tremors, and you may just be generally afraid and not want to be around people because there's a risk that something might happen. Anxiety is really, really difficult to deal with. The other thing is that other people can't understand it. Why are you nervous? I don't know, I just am. Why don't you just get over it? I can't. You just need to go do whatever it is you're avoiding because of your anxiety. You're a child, why don't you go to school? I don't want to. And every morning it's a chore. I don't want to go to school. Why not? I just don't. If you hear I just don't, the odds are pretty good that there's an anxiety problem. It's difficult to explain, and it's difficult for other people to understand the way that you're feeling inside. Okay. The difficulty in treating anxiety, and I run into this all the time, is that generally when people walk into the office for an assessment, they can tell you that I have a problem with anxiety. I'm nervous and I'm tense. But then you ask them, well, what triggers your anxiety? And they're too far away from their anxiety to really be able to explain it very well. I'm not sure. I was just nervous. That's very difficult to understand even on a therapist point. Then you ask, well, what was going on when you started to be anxious? And because we don't like to remember problems very well, it's like, I'm not exactly sure. I just know that I panicked and I freaked out. What were you doing before that? Man, I don't know. I don't know. And so that I don't know makes it a little bit difficult. And then one of the main treatments for anxiety is exposure, where somebody has to go and actually confront the thing that they're afraid of. And if you're afraid of something, do you really want to face it that close? So you start with something called successive approximations if you do that. If you're afraid of snakes, like on the slide, well, we start by looking at a picture of a snake. Something very easy. I can see a picture. Okay. Then we watch a video of a snake, and we move just a little bit closer and a little bit closer, and maybe at the end we end up at the zoo facing a tank full of snakes. But you just get little by little by little, and maybe that'll help. Okay. Anxiety is also in your old brain. If you feel the very top of your head and you go straight down in the most protected part of your brain, that's where your anxiety comes from. And what happens is you're confronted by something that makes you afraid, like somebody cutting you off in traffic. And that part of your brain opens up and it throws adrenaline out there and you react to the stimulus. Okay. Then it's supposed to close and everything's okay until the next time. Well, people that have chronic anxiety, theirs opens up, but it doesn't quite shut all the way. And they're nervous all the time. We're not built for that, like I said before. And so everything becomes stressful because I just can't close that piece of my brain off completely. And that anxiety is faster than anything else in your life. Think about the last time you were cut off in traffic, even if you were the passenger. It scared you a whole lot and your reaction was really fast, faster than you can imagine. You can't think fast enough to overcome the speed of that anxiety. And that's part of the problem. Your anxiety is just too fast for your thinking brain to catch up to it. And that's when it becomes a problem. But anxiety can be a growth opportunity. So there are two very close ideas about anxiety about this, and what you believe is entirely up to you. First of all, you can think, well, we need to learn how to be brave. We need to go out and face the world. Very similar to that is we need to unlearn what we're already afraid of. And so that idea says, you know what, there are things out there we're programmed to be afraid of automatically. We weren't confronted with it, we're just automatically scared of it. And we have to unlearn that anxiety. And either way, you have to be out in the world. So how do we grow from our anxiety? Well, we try new things. First time you were ever at an amusement park, you got on a roller coaster. That's really anxiety provoking, but you grew from it. It made you brave because you tried something new. You also become self-aware about your own trouble spots. You learn what you are afraid of that maybe you should be afraid of, and I can't do that. It's when it becomes a problem, that's where it gets iffy. My older brother, God love him, can't fly. He was on a plane trip, and the turbulence just really scared him a whole lot. He'll take a bus somewhere, but he can't fly, and he knows that. And so it's not that big of a problem for him, so he doesn't seek treatment, but he knows his trouble spot. He knows himself. And the last thing is learning from overcoming adversity. When you face your fear, you can become stronger and you can actually overcome it and become a different person. How do you do that? You celebrate wins. Just about every type of emotional or psychological problem, part of the treatment is celebrating wins. Now let's be honest. We're primed from a very young age to see losses. When you were a little kid and you went to grade school and you messed up on a test, a quiz, or your homework, they took a bright red pen and marked out what you did wrong. They primed you to see problems. And more these days, that's all we see are problems because nobody talks about the wins. You have to celebrate your own wins. It doesn't have to be a big deal, but you have to pay attention to them because nobody else will. And if you don't celebrate a win, then the win really didn't exist. Now, I was talking to some people yesterday, some new employees at the hospital. You have to see everything in front of you because the Super Bowl's not every day. It's once a year. But you have to have small wins in between, in training camp, in games, in scrimmages, in practice, in order to get to the Super Bowl. And so you have to see those all the time. So there was this lady, nice lady, came to see me at the office. And we sat down and I said, okay, why are you here? And she said, I can't drive. At all? No, I can drive. I just can't drive outside of my hometown. What happens? Well, when I cross the city limits, I get nervous, I get anxious, I get tense, I get afraid, and I just want to turn around. Okay. Here's what we need to do. You need to drive to Edinburgh. Then you need to drive to San Juan. Then you need to drive to Mission. And you also need to drive in your hometown. Because we need to know how you feel and what part of the driving makes you most nervous. Like I mentioned before, you don't really know that stimulus. I said, but also, whenever you drive, if you drive down to the corner to put gas in your car, if you drive to H-E-B and get your groceries, wherever you go, no matter how far or how close, when you get home and pull into your driveway, don't get out of the car. Sit there for a moment and think about, I made it. I made it to H-E-B and back, and nothing happened. I went to work and came home, and nothing happened. Now, that was at the end of the assessment, the first visit. And I didn't see her again for 6 months. And I came into the office one day, and there she was on my book. And I hadn't seen her for 6 months. I said, what's up? She said, I can't drive again. What do you mean you can't drive again? She said, I was driving everywhere. I went to the island. I went to San Antonio. There was no problem. And then last week, I can't drive again. I can't leave town. Okay. What happened? I don't know. Are you celebrating your wins when you get home? No, I'll quit doing that. Okay. Go home, go drive, celebrate your wins when you get home. And I haven't seen her since. You have to recognize when you're doing well. If you end up in treatment, it's because you recognize you have problems. But you have to recognize when you're doing well. Okay. So, is your anxiety a problem? That's up to you. Is it affecting work or school or your relationships? And if the answer is yes, yeah, you probably have a problem. To be honest, if you ask yourself, do I have a problem? You've probably got a problem. Do you need to seek help? Well, how about a test? There's a test online. It's a free test. It doesn't require a professional or anything else. It's called the GAD-7, G-A-D. That stands for Generalized Anxiety Disorder. 7 means there's 7 questions. Search it, Google it, take the test. You can do it on your own. So it asks you 7 questions about 7 different forms of anxiety symptoms. And you just rate it 0 to 3. 0 means no, I don't have this, and 3 means I have it nearly every day. And it's for the last 2 weeks only. And then it gives you a score. If you've got a score, you probably need some help. And what you do is you make an appointment to see a mental health professional. You go for an assessment. An assessment is an interview. You go in, you sit down, and you talk. And the professional asks you questions. How are you doing? Why are you here? What's going on? It's all questions and answers. And hopefully at the end of the session, they'll give you a couple things to take home until the next session. The assessment will determine what kind of treatment you need, what form it might take, how long. And you don't have to necessarily see a clinician. You can just talk to your doctor about it on a regular visit. The good thing about an assessment is every insurance, if you've got it, has to cover an assessment. They might not cover treatment, but they do have to cover an assessment. It's just seeing what's going on and what can we do for you. It also gives you a neutral third party. If you talk to your mom about it, she may say, oh, everything's okay. Well, that's what moms do. If you talk to your friends about it, they may give you a curious look or everything else, but they can't always help you. You can also talk to other people about it. If your pastor does counseling, you can talk to your pastor. You can talk to colleagues. You just want to talk to somebody who's safe. Somebody who's safe who'll listen to you non-judgmentally and has the time to listen to you. And will just hear what you have to say and then give some sort of positive or at least neutral feedback. If you've got somebody who's really sour, now you probably don't want to talk to those people about this kind of a problem. And if you've got somebody who's a little loose-lipped, well, maybe not them either. But talk to somebody. Ask questions. And if you're concerned, you can call us at the hospital. They can do an assessment if you want to, although anxiety generally is not something that will get you admitted to a psychiatric facility. Okay. I really appreciate you all watching today and listening to me, and thank you so much. Hi, Tom.
All right. That was all very fascinating to hear about, because I know that everybody deals with anxiety in some shape or form, whether it's for the, as you mentioned, for that one moment. It's those that have that chronic anxiety that really have to worry. Can you talk a little bit, and you talked about the physical symptoms of anxiety and how they can present and maybe make you think that you're having a heart attack or some other issue. What are some of the most common symptoms that you see in the patients when they're telling you what they're experiencing?
A lot of them have problems. They feel like they can't breathe. It's a lie that anxiety tells you. It tells you, anxiety tells you that things are going wrong that really aren't. And no one has ever died from anxiety, but you feel like you might die because you can get thumping in your chest. And I told you I went to the emergency room. That's what I had, was a really hard thump and a lot of pain in my chest. And it turned out to be nothing. It was just some sort of panic issue in a moment, and that was it. And generally what happens in the emergency room is people will have symptoms like this, where they can't breathe, or their heart feels like it's racing. Sometimes there's just a feeling of unreality, like just tremors, stuff like that. And you go, and what they do is they do an EKG and they do some lab tests and everything else. If it turns out to be nothing wrong with your heart, they'll say, "Oh, you had a panic attack."
But is it something that you should worry about? Obviously, when should you really start thinking, I get these symptoms I'm starting to get these often whenever I do this? It's important to know what was happening at the time, what may have triggered it.
It's important to know down the road, but initially it's important to seek help for it.
Yes.
And there are some breathing exercises and things that can reduce your anxiety in the moment. But if you're having a real panic attack, you really can't think about that. That panic is running through your head way too fast. Panic is one of those that's usually treated with medications, as opposed to a generalized anxiety disorder. But you want to seek help the first time. But to be honest, occasionally I have chest pain from anxiety. And if I can do mindful breathing and it subsides on its own, I don't worry about it. If I had an issue where I could do my breathing and a little bit of meditation and the pain persists, well, I'm going to see the doctor. But that's because of my history and looking into it in the first place.
Now, obviously, during COVID, we had a lot of unknowns that we were dealing with. Did you see an increase in anxiety during COVID? Have you seen now, 3 years later, the effects of COVID in terms of anxiety?
The real effect of COVID for my practice was not the pandemic itself, but it was when the pandemic restrictions were lifted. We had problems with I saw quite a few people who were school personnel who were afraid of going back to school to their jobs because there were still a whole lot of question marks about COVID and its long-term effects and everything else. And I don't want to go back and get exposed. I don't want to get sick. You know, I've had people that developed really bad phobia about germs and everything else just because of the pandemic and their fear of illness.
And another thing we've heard a lot about, unfortunately, in the news is gun violence and all of the shootings that you hear about in communities. I was just in Las Vegas this weekend, and I was near the Mandalay Bay, and I remember there was that country musical festival where they had that shooting. And for a second, I thought, oh, wow. But is that something that you also are noticing, that people are noticing these sort of things happening, and they're happening everywhere at any time? Is that something that's also causing an increase?
It is something that can cause an increase in anxiety, but if you've been exposed to something like this, even on the television, that can be a source of trauma. And trauma was actually removed from the anxiety disorders and has its own category of disorders right now. In the past, PTSD and some of the other trauma disorders, brief trauma, were in the anxiety category because their symptoms were similar. But because some of the reactions are different, they have removed them and they have their own separate category now.
So we also have anxiety and then the PTSD that you're dealing with as well. Do you find that there are a lot of coexisting mental health issues that are happening, like there's anxiety and depression, or anxiety and substance use disorder?
Anxiety and depression are really strongly linked, but it's not really clear whether one is more prevalent than the other. And you can have one or the other. It's just very common to have both. And anxiety and substance abuse can go hand in hand because a lot of the traditional medications for anxiety, things like Xanax, Valium, Klonopin, and that family, that class of drugs, have a high addictive potential. But also, if you have somebody who has a problem with opiates, with pain medications, they can sometimes take the anti-anxiety medications in a pinch to help them to prevent withdrawal.
Now, how do you treat when it comes to having like those two coexisting issues? Is it something, because obviously anxiety, as you mentioned, is not something that you can be hospitalized for. So is it something that it's more learning, like how to deal with it through medicine or through self-help, strategies that help you kind of get over that hump and you deal more with the depression issue?
I've had a lot of people who come to see me because they don't want to take medication. And so their physician has said, why don't we try counseling? And if that doesn't work, then we'll have to start medications. It depends on the scope of the problem. Now, as I said before, anxiety and depression are linked thoroughly. And oftentimes it comes down to what's worse for you today. On a treatment plan, if you're seeing somebody with both problems, you're going to have some sort of planning for both. And in my practice, it can vary from session to session which one is more important that we talk about today. It's really about you and how you feel and what you feel the current problem is.
All right. I came across this quote that said, the thoughts you resist persist. And so it's obviously if you are just avoiding it, it's going to constantly persist until you tackle it. And I know you talked about be brave and then unlearning anxiety in those two aspects, but either way, it's taking action, right? You have to take action.
If you don't take action now, it's like the old Midas Muffler commercial from the 70s. Gosh, I'm aging myself. Pay me now or pay me later. And so the earlier that you can seek help and get this, it will not spin and become worse and snowball upon itself.
Now, phobias are something that you hear a lot about. People just have a phobia. As you said, your wife had a phobia of caterpillars and worms, which how you can get to what caused that initially? Was it something from childhood? But how do you address phobias and how get to the bottom line of what's caused the root of that problem and addressing it?
The root of the problem really isn't that important because the problem is there. And so what happens sometimes in therapy is we worry too much about the why. And in my experience, the why is not that important because that horse has already left the barn. It's what do we do about it now that's more important. And so it doesn't matter why you're afraid of whatever it is that's causing you problems. And generally, if you're seeking help for a phobia, it's because you run into that thing that makes you afraid more often than not. And so this lady that came to see me because she was afraid of driving, that was her phobia. And so why she was afraid of driving didn't really matter.
It was just making sure she was driving.
Okay, now how do we do this? And so hers was, I thought at the time we tried something easy. Let's just try and celebrate these things. And so her phobia was not that intense. I have encountered people with more intense phobias of driving, and a lot of them have good reason to be afraid of driving in their past. It's like, okay, now what do we do about it? And generally with a phobia, you've got two options. One of them is exposure, and the other is, I talked about very briefly, successive approximations. Successive approximations, we start a little distant and we get closer and closer and closer to the thing you're afraid of. Exposure will throw you into it. Just like somebody throwing a kid into the deep end of the pool, right? So an example of that a lot of people may be familiar with was the original movie Raiders of the Lost Ark with Harrison Ford. He falls through the floor and into a big room full of snakes, which he has a phobic fear of. That was exposure. I'm facing my fear head on right now completely.
And full on doing it.
Full on, yes, absolutely.
Well, it brings back a story. So when I was growing up, I would go to CCD, and my mom wasn't home to drive me. And my mom's best friend, who was like a second mom to me, rest in peace, Rachel, she was afraid of driving at night. And I did not really realize why she was afraid of driving at night. And I was like, but I have to go, you have to drive me. And it was raining, and I made her take me, but she was later grateful that I did that I made her, that I made her take me, because it made her face that fear. And having me with her, at least there was a person in the car with her who could help guide or whatever. But I didn't really know as a child. But is that, what should we do if we know somebody who has a phobia and maybe they aren't seeking the treatment yet? And how can we help them sort of address it?
It's going to be difficult because they haven't seen it as big enough as a problem yet. And so one of the other things that I have used as a tool in treatment is your cell phone.
Okay.
And use the voice recorder on the cell phone. And so like I've had people that were afraid of driving. I said, okay, here's what you do. Take your cell phone, you put it in the cup holder, turn the voice recorder on, and then you drive. And you can talk as you're driving and see how you feel and check in with yourself. And we can review that recording later, or even you can review that and see how it felt as you went. And so it gives a better record of something like that. But until they see it as a real problem, they're not going to do very much about it, although it can cause them to avoid a lot of things.
Now let's talk a little bit about our thought patterns. Why is it so important to question those thought patterns to sort of help us regain control of the situation? Because
a lot of times the anxiety is irrational. You're afraid of something just because, or maybe you learned it from somebody else. I believe that my sister's fear of snakes is learned. That she was afraid of snakes because everybody else in the family that was older than her were also afraid of snakes. And we have a culture that kind of fears them and everything else. And so you hear these stories and you start to learn these kinds of fears. So a lot of times we are afraid for no particular reason, and it's very difficult for us to explain it. And we worry a little bit too much about why we're afraid and why it's not important. Let's just say, okay, how's this impacting you today, and what can we do to change that?
Well, I do have a fear of sharks, but I do get in the ocean. I just will not go very deep.
My stepdaughter still will not get in the ocean because of Jaws in the 1970s.
Exactly, that movie was very traumatic.
It
so
was.
I think it's more PTSD than it is actual anxiety there. How does focusing on deep breathing help?
One of the things that breathing allows you to do is it allows your emotions, excuse me, I have this backwards. It allows your thoughts to catch up to your emotions.
Okay.
Your emotions are always faster. And so it gives you just that little chance for your thoughts to catch up and be able to moderate some of that anxiety. The other thing that it does is sometimes the anxiety can take us somewhere in the past or take us somewhere else. And that deep breathing can allow you to focus on the present because it's the present that we need to be concerned about. A lot of our anxiety is anticipatory. It's about what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next month, or next year. And the truth is, what we have to deal with is right now. And so the breathing can try and center you and ground you into the present moment.
Are there any techniques that you recommend that people use? I know that there's the 4-4-5 rule, like 4 counts in, 4 breaths out, and then do that for 5 minutes, things like that. Are there any that you recommend for people?
Sometimes when people have some fairly intense fear, distraction is plenty. And so you close your eyes, you take a deep breath, open them back, and you look for things that are blue, just blue. And ignore everything else. It distracts you for a moment and makes you think about something around you. I have clients that use scented candles or other things with a heavy scent that will give them a sensory distraction. And one actually uses frozen vegetables.
Oh, wow.
When she starts to feel a little unreal, she'll grab that, and the stinging of the cold vegetables will kind of bring her back into the present moment.
Did you see my questions ahead of time? Because
No.
I had use aromatherapy, which you just talked about, the scents, and then grounding techniques, which you just kind of sort of mentioned. There's the 3-3-3, where you can focus on 3 things you can see, 3 sounds you can hear,
Yes.
and 3 things that you can touch. Like grab 3 different things to feel the textures.
Right. Additionally, everybody, when you go to health fairs and things like that, they have stress balls as a giveaway. And yes, you can do that because anxiety oftentimes will produce energy and you need to move a little bit. If you watch somebody start tapping their foot, you know that they've become a little bit more anxious, or they're bouncing their leg or something like that. Right after the pet rock craze in the 70s, in the southeast U.S., they came out with these things, and they used different tribes to describe them, like the Navajo worry rock.
Okay.
And what it is, it's a very small polished stone, and they have one flat edge. I buy them at craft fairs and things like that, and I'll give them to some of my anxious clients. But you can carry it around in your pocket and everything else. And what you do is you fit it in between your thumb and your forefinger, and you just rub it with your thumb. And the folktale thing was that you're rubbing your anxiety into the stone.
Okay. So it's absorbing all of that anxiety that you have.
But what you're actually doing is you're doing a little stereotyped movement. You're doing something with that energy that you're anxious with. When you see some people that have severe problems, you'll see them rocking back and forth all the time. That's generally because of anxiety. And if you try and make them stop, it gets really worse.
Now, you talked a lot about that the why isn't so important, but in terms of identifying and learning how to manage your triggers, understanding that there are certain things that are going to trigger you, how important is it to kind of realize what your triggers are?
Oh, this is a controversial thing for me. There will be triggers. And a lot of the time where they sanitize things, whether it's verbal or image-wise, some of that goes a little bit overboard, because kind of like you have to develop a resistance to disease and germs and things like that. If you shelter too much with triggers, what you end up doing is you become too sensitive to everything. So there are some triggers for people with trauma problems, but for just a general anxiety, you've got to see some of these things, and you've got to learn to be brave, and you've got to unlearn some.
But also understanding that these are your triggers, and confront them, face them, whatever you need to do, but knowing that this situation is going to trigger me.
And if absolutely necessary, and this is usually with trauma, you have to try and avoid some of those triggers as best you can, until over time you can get used to those. And I currently have a patient that's using successive approximations to deal with, oddly enough, a sound trigger that really makes her fall into her PTSD symptoms.
What should you do in a panic attack?
It's very difficult to do anything in a panic attack, because it feels like the world is coming apart and you may be dying. So hopefully you have somebody close to you that can talk to you very soothingly, and just try and get you to start breathing and paying attention to your breath. Because probably the most common symptom of a panic attack is that feeling that I can't breathe. You see people in the old things breathing into a paper bag and everything like that, but really you just kind of need help. You really need help during the panic attack. It's one of the anxiety disorders where you can have medication as needed, and so when you start to feel it, you can take medication if it's prescribed. But the important thing about a panic attack is realizing it at the very beginning, when you start in that direction, because it can feel like the hill on a roller coaster. And you really want to try and do something to hit it off before you end up at the bottom of that hill. Yes.
All right. Now, you talked a little bit about kids being anxious of not wanting to go to school or whatever. What tips do you have for parents and caregivers, especially since anxiety disorders affect some 31% of children and adolescents? How can parents work with their kids?
They can get an assessment.
Okay.
Not necessarily with a mental health therapist, although mental health therapists are fantastic. But they can talk to the school counselor and the teachers. They need to be involved in their child's life and find out what's going on, because a lot of times your children are not going to tell you everything. They'll give you the truth, not the whole truth. And a lot of times there's something going on that easily can be remedied, but you just don't know about it unless you are really engaged in your child's life.
Okay. Now, in terms of anxiety prevention, there are some tips that they give: limiting alcohol and caffeine and sugar consumption. Why does alcohol and sugar and caffeine that's just sort of helps that snowball? Is that right?
Well, when you're anxious, when you're really anxious, and you have that kind of sense of I have to do something, it's very much like there's a danger and I have to react. And even if it's as small as bouncing your leg or tapping your foot, the caffeine is going to actually enhance that somewhat. And so now you're jittery from the caffeine, and it can compound your anxiety when really you need to slow down. The thing with alcohol and anxiety is that alcohol is a depressant, and some people will use alcohol to just kind of chill out and knock down their anxiety. They do the same with marijuana as well. And really it's teaching you a maladaptive coping mechanism, something that can cause you problems long term.
Okay.
Because you see that as the solution, and it's not, it's temporary.
All right. It says to take time out for yourself every day. Even 20 minutes of relaxation or doing something pleasurable for yourself can be restorative and decrease overall anxiety.
Yes.
A lot of times we don't take enough time for ourselves. Is that right?
No, because it never feels like we have any time for ourselves. We're always doing something. But some of these things you can do while you're sitting in traffic waiting for the next light and wondering which person isn't going to go. You can sit there and you can just do some breathing exercises. You can listen to some music that you like. And so I have my iPod hooked into the car so that I don't have to take a chance on what's on the radio. I can listen to something that makes me feel good and makes. You can also, I recommend to a lot of people to have a YouTube playlist of just little sketches or little bits from comedians that make you laugh. But you have to have quite a few. You can't watch the same one over and over again. I also recommend that people have a YouTube playlist of dance music. You have to have at least 4 or 5, and you just dance for one song.
Dance like nobody's watching.
Like nobody's watching. Sure.
All right. And we talk a lot about exercise just being overall a healthy thing that we should be doing. But does exercise help with anxiety? Sure,
because if you get your heart rate up enough with your exercise, if you do enough of it over a long enough period of time, 10, 15 minutes really is all that it takes, it will release some neurotransmitters in your body that are naturally occurring that can help you just relax.
And are there any telltale signs when anxiety is becoming an issue and when we should really be seeking some help for it?
Anxiety, like most mental disorders, is dependent upon the person who feels it. When I feel it's a problem, I'll go seek help for it. But there really are only a couple of mental disorders where other people, determine if it's a problem. Substance disorders, dementia. But if you feel it's a problem, and if you just ask yourself, I wonder if my nervousness is getting too much. Yeah, it's getting too much.
It's getting too much. When you start thinking, is this becoming a problem?
Yes.
It probably is becoming a problem.
Absolutely.
All right. How can you help somebody with anxiety in that moment? Like when they're dealing, especially someone with a panic attack, what's your best advice for them? You said soothing voice, being calm.
Right.
Helping them with those grounding techniques.
And you kind of talk to them in a monotones, kind of a hypnotic way. You can, and part of it has to do with who it is. Tom, it's all right. We're going to be okay. Take a breath. And so what you're doing is you're calming somebody, and oftentimes you treat them like you would an anxious child.
All right.
And you just kind of be as the less stimulation, the best. Just bring it down just a little bit. It's going to be all right. You're going to be okay.
You're calming me already.
We'll get through this. Okay? You're not dying. I can see your breath going in and out. And so really it's reassurance until they can get through that episode. Unfortunately, sometimes that's not enough, and really it has to run its course.
All right, I came across some quotes, and so don't believe everything you think. So I know when it comes to anxiety, we always are thinking the worst. It's not always the worst.
No, most of the time it's not. And here's the funny thing about it is oftentimes afterward, if you've got a test coming up, an important test coming up, and you get really anxious and nervous and everything else, after the test is over and you've passed, you say, good Lord, I wasted so much time and energy on all of that stress. But in the moment, when you're really stressing about it, it's very difficult not to, because the future event is that important. I got on an airplane one time with my grandsons, and my youngest grandson was very young. And we were sitting there, they were still boarding, and he just looks around and he says, we're all gonna die.
Oh no.
We got to where the flight was, and all of his nervousness ceased until we had to get on the plane again. But he wasted a whole lot of anxious energy.
That was a very long flight.
It was a very long flight for him, yes.
The only way out is through, according to Robert Frost. So again, as you said, sometimes you really do have to be brave.
You have to be brave, and you have to confront the thing that's making you afraid. Yes. My lady had to drive. She had to drive because it's the only way she could drive, is to actually do it.
And the last one, anxiety will always be part of life. It just shouldn't overtake it.
Right. We have to be afraid sometimes. It is what protects us. It's what keeps us alive. Otherwise, we would probably do some things that probably would result in a Darwin Award. So we have to be able to move through and survive. And the real thing that it all boils down to is your life is not inside. Your life is out there in the world, and you need to go live it. And anxiety is one of those things that tries to hold you back from doing that.
All righty. And any final key piece of advice that you'd like to leave our viewers with?
Ground yourself as best that you can. Figure out, I'm right here, right now. Let me take care of the next thing in front of me. And that's all, just the next thing. And we'll cross these anxious things when we get there.
And don't forget to celebrate the wins.
Celebrate the wins, absolutely.
Baby steps.
Baby
You're
steps.
doing the work, you're baby stepping. Do you know that movie?
Yes. Yes, unfortunately.
Bill Murray.
Yes, I do.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, Bob. We really appreciate your time.
Not at all.
And that officially concludes our webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you'll continue to prioritize your mental health and the mental health of your loved ones. Now, your mental health matters, and STHS Behavioral can help. The facility has served the South Texas community for more than 30 years, offering inpatient and outpatient treatment options, including the facility's recently launched chemical dependency unit. If you or a loved one is experiencing a mental health issue or dealing with substance use disorder, we encourage you to schedule a confidential assessment by calling our hotline at 956-388-1300. Remember, you are not alone. Don't hesitate to speak to a friend or seek professional help if you may be needing any emotional or mental health support. And if you are experiencing a mental health crisis, please call the National Suicide and Crisis Line at 988. Licensed counselors are available to speak with you in English and Spanish 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Don't miss our next installment of this Let's Talk Mental Health series on Thursday, March 7th at 5:30 live via Facebook, where we'll be continuing to talk about grief and loss. We hope you can join us. And to watch our previous Let's Talk Mental Health webinars, all you have to do is visit sthsletstalk.com. Until our next webinar, stay healthy, stay safe, and please continue to prioritize your mental well-being. Sometimes life's burdens can take their toll on your emotional well-being. If you or a loved one is struggling, know that you are not alone. South Texas Health System Behavioral can help you cope with depression, manage feelings of anxiety, regain control of mood swings, and recover from substance use disorders. Our staff is available 24/7, offering the quality and compassionate inpatient and outpatient care you need to overcome life's challenges. South Texas Health System Behavioral, where your mental health is our priority.